Talking all things theatre and events.
Late 2017, when we started talking about what we need to do to get that little bit bigger.
Lighting designers are working with video, even if they don't sort of necessarily realise.
That was it was a big dream of mine, to go to Edinburgh Fringe Festival.
The Stage Is Yours podcast.
Hello and welcome back to The Stage Is Your podcast with me, your host Carl Graham, joined as always by producer Dan, and we're talking all things theatre and events. On today's podcast, we're joined by the wonderful Emma Dean. She's a singer, songwriter and performer from Brisbane, Australia. We talk all about her work as a performer and a recording artist, along with her work in the community with her choir Cheep Trill. Emma Dean, the stage is yours. So here we are on the podcast talking to someone technically in the future, the wonderfully talented Emma Dean. How are you?
Oh, I'm really well, thank you, Callum. How are you?
I'm all right. All things considered, in the crazy world that we are living in right now. But let's, first of all, for those who don't know who you are, Emma is over in Oz, in wonderful sunny weather, and there's me sat at sort of 1-2 degrees in Edinburgh, watching the snow melt. So it's a little bit weird, but so let's try and sum up what you or who you are and what you do, because I feel like that's quite a broad thing when it comes to yourself.
Well, it is kind of broad. I tend to wear many different hats. So I'm a musician. I write songs, I write shows, and I perform in those shows, and usually tour them around the place, but obviously that's that's not happening at the moment. So that's one area of my life. And then the other side is I am a choir director. So I run community choirs, and I really love doing that. I love empowering people who have not necessarily been trained in music to sing and to use their voice and to have fun. I think there's great power in that. And I'm a music educator, so I sort of help people to sort of tap into their creativity. Those are two of the hats that I wear.
I feel like we all have those kind of bits and pieces, but I think it's certainly two very different things, which is great. So we'll get the sort of bit of the conversation out the way that I've spoken a lot about, and I don't really want to speak about, but I feel it's quite, with you being on the other side of the world, it'll be quite interesting to see how things have differed. And I'm aware that things are probably slightly further ahead in Oz than we are, in the sense that we had about a week where shows opened, and then we all went back into our second, third, I've lost track now, of lockdowns. So how have things been in Australia? It's obviously you're in a very different situation to what we were, and even now still it's all very different.
That's right. And, firstly, I want to say I'm so sorry to all of you in the UK and other parts of the world as well who have had such a tough time in the past year. I can only imagine. I've been very lucky because I live in Brisbane in Queensland, and we had a little lockdown last year, but it didn't last for that long, and we were still able to go out. And we really got our first taste of a proper lockdown a couple of weeks ago when a woman was diagnosed with the UK strain, as they're calling it. I don't know if that's the the right terminology. But due to the lockdown, we kind of locked down very, very quickly, only for 3 days, and managed to sort of keep that under control. But of course, that even in those 3 days, I had to postpone a show 2 weeks, and you got a real taste for how difficult life must be, particularly for people in the performing arts industry, when you're faced with lockdowns that last for months on end. Melbourne in Australia have experienced a very hard time last year. They were in lockdown for many, many months. So they were probably the city that was hit the worst, I think, due to COVID. Yeah.
Yeah, we're unfortunately closing on for if we hit March 16th, I would have spent a year without doing anything in theatre. If we hit March 16th, the joys of that. Well, technically I've done one day's work, but and so it's a very, very weird time, and we're all kind of sat just waiting and kind of everything. Like I said, we got very confident early December that we were able to start doing things, and we've got, even then, with massive restrictions on what was happening. The West End had essentially restaged all their shows to be concert versions so that they could socially distance in the show.
Oh my gosh.
And we'd really kind of restructured it in an effort to try and do it. Things were open for about a week, and then it all went straight back, and we were like, great, joys. So we're all kind of sat waiting. Everyone's trying to find creative outlets, let's put it that way, just to kind of wait and see and find something to fill the gap. So in terms of within Brisbane, obviously, have you pretty much been able to do shows throughout for the vast majority of the time?
No, not really. During, it was sort of like the middle part of last year, there was not much going on at all. And then in September, I was lucky enough to be part of a festival called Brisbane Festival. And, that was touch and go. For so long we thought, there's no way this is going ahead, but we've just got to keep planning. And, we had to plan one version of the show, if it was going to be an online situation, or we had to plan, another part of the show, another version of the show, using social distancing. So it was this constant sort of pivoting and reworking the show. But it managed to go ahead, and the genius festival director, Louise Bazina, came up with this concept of putting the shows on the back of a truck and driving the truck into the 190 different suburbs in Brisbane and entertaining the locals that way. So they could kind of sit on their veranda and watch these shows, these crazy cabaret shows and variety shows and rock concerts in their own cul-de-sac street. So that was incredible that went ahead, and we were lucky enough at that point, things were kind of under control, that we were also able to do a couple of shows in venues, but socially distanced. So much more, I guess, limited capacity. So we were really lucky to be able to do that. People in Melbourne, however, of course, couldn't do anything like that. And the other thing that I think we're all realising is that this can all change in a split second. You think you're doing well and yep, we've got it under control here, we're so lucky. And then it all changes overnight, and you wake up and there's been, a dozen cases. And so, it makes it very difficult to plan anything. Absolutely.
We're in, that's the situation we're all in. Everyone with it, certainly in the UK at the moment, it's just sat going, well, is it worth trying to plan anything? We're sat there, obviously, and looking forward and going into things, and things are already, unfortunately, for this summer. Glastonbury last week was cancelled for this summer, and you go, okay, that's just the start, and that will slowly potentially filter down, and we're kind of going, well, the UK is essentially still in lockdown till end of February, and that's only to be reviewed. So we're all kind of going, and there's only so much online theatre and content you can take in.
That's right.
Because a few guys on the podcast have all said nothing can recreate that being in the venue with a live audience, with a show, with something in front of you. So nothing can quite recreate that. Yes, it's great, and there's some amazing offerings online. And there was this lovely moment in the first lockdown that we had in the UK where everyone just dumped everything they had online. If they had recordings of a show, if they had that, and made it accessible, and suddenly there was just this mountain of theatre that we thought you may not have ever got to see of a certain person on stage doing a certain role at the National Theatre, and it was there available. So there was just this lovely moment at that point where you're like, we all kind of went, yeah, we're all in this together, so let's just dump all this online. And I suppose it was there, but none of us quite thought it would be closing off for this length of time. So
That's right.
but you mentioned then that you've done some shows with social restrictions and things like that, and I'm quite intrigued to see how people are finding this. I've chatted to a few people who have managed to do a show with some restrictions, and I'm kind of like, I can't quite get my head around it as to how that quite interaction works, and how that, and knowing your shows as well, I imagine that kind of made them feel very different.
Yeah, it was weird. And the other thing actually to mention is there's this little loophole where if you can sort of argue that your show needs to have contact, then you can get around it. So I don't know, it kind of, I don't really understand the thinking behind that, right? But what we did for our show, there was a couple of points where I needed to share a guitar and I needed to share a keyboard with another member of the band. And so they had to sterilize it and wipe it down as part of the show and then hand it to me on stage. And this is all in character. So it was like, we kind of had to just like, I guess, write it into the show somehow or just do it really secretively. And that was super weird. Like, and my entrance, okay, so like we had initially planned for, because this show was called Hot Mess Mama, and I played a personification of Mother Earth. Anyway, so Mother Earth, she's hit rock bottom. Humans have, chewed her up and spat her out. And she's actually kind of like Britney circa 2007. She's kind of drinking, she's boozing, And so she enters through the audience, kind of with this champagne bottle and this ciggy. And we thought, that'll be fine. And of course it wasn't, because you had to socially distance. And we had this idea of getting, one of the audience members to sort of help me onto the stage awkwardly. And of course you couldn't touch. So we just kind of had to rework all of these little things. In terms of the audience and how they socially distanced, you had to buy like tables, and you had to sort of, I guess, arrive in your little family unit, and they did it that way. But still, like, even so, it was still hard. Like, looking out to the audience, I was thinking, is this really that socially distanced? It's really hard, and venues can only enforce it so much, but how can you really control a room full of 300 people or whatever?
Absolutely. I mean, there were test events in the UK with some of the theatres, and it just kind of proved that certainly the larger commercial theatres, that it was trying to make it financially viable was an absolute nightmare. Because I think most of them were figured out that it would be sort of a third capacity, which if you're in some of the big West End shows in London where a ticket's already expensive at a normal show and you're only putting a third of people in, it was a bit different. So it was all kind of, there was lots of things banded around, different things, and we all came up with these different solutions. And there was a lot more drive-in stuff in the UK, which isn't particularly that common in the UK because normally the weather's awful. So they tried to do things, that kind of thing. So they tried to do some of those. Some things managed to get up off the ground, some struggled, and it's just kind of been this real backwards and forwards. And then obviously similar to Australia in the sense of that different areas within the UK. So Scotland has a different set of regulations to England. Wales is different as well. And you kind of go, this is great. This is just, and so, it all became a bit of a mess over here, unfortunately, in that. And I think a lot of people just went for, at this point, no one can afford to put money into something that's going to just be cancelled. So we're all kind of doing that. So, but it's really interesting hearing you say those things, that even in those situations, that it does obviously change the dynamic of a show in the sense, because obviously normally it would be, certainly from with a cabaret type show as well, the kind of that interaction between people within the audience organically plays such a big part for you yourself as well. So it's all a bit rubbish really. So hoping that things come back and that we can slowly start to get going. We're hoping for possibly some sort of summer season for festival and stuff in the UK. think that's what we're kind of hoping for.
fingers
Later
crossed.
is what we're hoping for. When we're allowed to do things outside, but there's probably still going to be some social distancing and restriction on
Of
numbers
course.
of that. So, but we're hoping we'll get something, if not at least planning stuff, and just try and. We'd love to say we can just do a summer season in September and October, but we can't guarantee the weather.
You can't.
So
Oh, of course.
So-
You know, I think the silver lining, though, is that people are really beginning to realise how important the arts are, you know, and how much they rely on the arts. Even in lockdown, you know, things like Netflix.
Yeah,
Well, that's
absolutely.
all art, you know, like that's all. So I do feel like that is something positive that has come out of it. And the other thing is that, thank God, artists are so good at thinking outside the box, you know,
Yeah.
and we've had to flex that muscle so much over the past year, thinking of other ways to sort of make money. You know, my choir, of course, choirs were just kind of decimated here as well,
absolutely.
because it's so, you know, I guess, considered very dangerous to sing. And we had to sort of move towards an online platform for our choir. And we made it work, and I think we're all making it work as best we can. And so we should all give ourselves a little pat on the back, I reckon, for
I think so.
kind of,
And
yeah.
it's the different offerings and things like that. So there's a thing in the UK called the show Must Go Online, where they do a whole play purely on Zoom. So you
Wow.
tune in on that, and the whole cast is on a screen like that, and they all turn their screen on at the right time, do that. We've all got little sets and stuff like that, using the green screen feature and stuff to kind of try and make some sort of play. And this kind of,
Wow.
certainly in the first lockdown, really took off, and because there wasn't any kind of offering. So there was that kind of thing. Everyone's turned their hands to things that they've always kind of either thought, I could possibly do this as like sort of a side hustle or things like that, and has become that. I mean, I'm sat in a jumper that says the earth would be without art, it's just earth, which is
Oh, I love that.
which is someone who was in the touring community in the UK, theatre-wise, his side hustle is that they've gone, right, I've got no work, that's what I'm going to do, is started producing jumpers and stuff like that, and doing that. And there's an Instagram page called Not on the West End, as it is now, obviously taking thing out of Not on the High Street being a website in the UK, but Not on the West End, which is everybody's side hustle. So just advertising what everyone who did work in theatre is now doing. And there's absolutely, you can think, if it's on there, it's on there. Like, it's, so you've got all the costume guys doing whatever they're doing. You've got like lighting guys making bespoke lights for people and things like that. So there's all sorts
That's
of different.
incredible.
So everyone's just kind of done that. I mean, this podcast is my kind of thing that
Yeah,
we've joked
good
about
for
for ages,
you.
and I've gone, well, and so yeah, we've all just kind of found something to do and kind of a way through it, really. So it's
Yes.
yeah, there are certainly some positives to be taken from it, and
That's
I've
right.
just had to tell myself, of all else, it's just been a break. It's
Oh.
just been some enforced time off, which I think
Yeah.
I sat down at the start of lockdown and I went, this is probably the first time I think I figured out it was something close to 6 years that I'd had more than 10 days off in a row.
Oh
And
my
I was
gosh.
like, how have I managed that? And that's what it was. And I was like, okay, fine. So the first few months was that when there was still some possible chance of things that I was involved with at the time, when it was still only going to, when we were told, oh yeah, it's fine, it's going to be a few weeks. And that didn't happen, and a whole 18 months worth of work went down the drain for me, but it is what it is. So yeah, but that's...
It
where
is
it is, so-
amazing, though, how, you know, I didn't realise how burnt out I was, really, until I stopped. You know,
very
and
much so.
I've heard a lot of people in the arts say the same thing, like, oh, I've just kind of figured out how draining it is to tour all the time, or like to create work all the time, you know. So, yeah, so in a way, just the pause has been a welcome change. But having said that, I'm coming from a very different position to you. You've had quite an extended pause, so like I think I'd be getting over it at this point. Yeah.
It's so bizarre. Like, so I was out on tour with Matthew Bourne's New Adventures at the time, and we were booked right up. We were on the show we were on. We were supposed to finish the UK till June. Then we were in Japan, China, and we kind of got wind of this in January. So there was a little bit of like, oh, we're still going to go to China, and they're like, yeah, it'll be fine. We're at Shanghai,
Oh,
it's
wow.
fine. And we were like, okay, fine. So that, and then with that, and then I'd have flown back to come back to in August to come and do the festival. And then literally flown straight back out to South Korea to join back up with the tour. So like my year was chock-a-block, and then I jumped back on their next show in October and done another year's work with that. That was the plan. And now I'm kind of gone, yeah, great, sat with a job, still trying to fill the gap and pay my bills. That's nothing to do with theatre in the slightest. The guys kind of talk to me who I work with and go, so what's going on with this and this? And I'm like, still nothing. So it's all a little bit kind of, it's there and we're kind of there. So we're just kind of sat waiting now. And I think we've all kind of just, everything's still sat in a massive pause. I think that's the only way I can describe it, is that certainly in the UK, everything's sat with a pause. Everything's pretty much ready. Like everyone's who's got something lined up to go is ready to go with it. And I think we're just hoping there's going to be that confidence in audiences and stuff to come back and see stuff and come out and bring that through. So because I certainly know that everything's pretty much lined up and sorted, and everyone's just waiting, hoping that it all gets good enough that everything can kind of happen. Yes, there might be some tweaks and changes that we have to happen. I don't quite know how a fringe is going to happen with lots of restrictions in place, but I'm sure we'll figure it out.
You'll figure it out.
So yeah, it's one of that. So yeah, like I said, it is nice to have lots of positives to come out of it, or trying to find those positives, and there are definitely things there. And if all it's done is meant I've had 10 months now of non-wear and tear on my body touring, then fine. It's at least, that's right. As long as I get 10 months potentially back later on, then that's fine. But anyway, enough Rona chat, because I've talked far too much over the last few months. And it still keeps going on, and every time I think it's getting better, it just throws another curveball at us. So that's just what it is, unfortunately. So let's talk about you and the things that you get up to, the things and the wide range of stuff that you've created. So let's start off things with, so actually let's talk about how we first actually met and where that kind of came from. So the first I heard of you was an email from my boss and very good friend Tara, of an email in my inbox saying, I've got someone from Australia who wants to bring a show to the Fringe. Can we make it work? And just going this, I'm like, okay, what is it? What am I doing? Like, what are we making work? Because normally when Tara asks me that, it's something that's probably shouldn't be coming to a Fringe venue. But I was like, and then I saw what it was, and I was like, okay, it's not normally what we do, but it was doable. I was like, there's some work, but we could make it happen. So let's start with that.
Oh my God. Well, that was such an experience. And I can't believe how long ago it was now.
Yeah, I was just
like, that was 2018.
Was it 18? Okay. I thought it was 17 in my head, but
I think it was 18. Yeah.
But it kind of blurs into one.
Yeah. And so that was it was a big dream of mine, to go to Edinburgh Fringe Festival. And I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it, and that I could do it by myself as a producer. I could sort of make it all happen. And of course, logistically, taking 5 people, a cast of 5, practically, to the other side of the world. I had never been to this festival before. I had never seen. I didn't really have a concept. I mean, I did have a concept, but I didn't know what the venue looked like apart from photos, and you can only get so much out of a photo and kind of your tech specs and all of that stuff. I'd never met any of you face to face. So it was like this massive risk, but I knew in my heart that it was a bucket list thing for me, and I needed to prove to myself that I could do it. The expense was huge. We had to fundraise. I think we fundraised over $20,000, and then the rest was my kind of life savings that I, so it was insane. And the thing that really convinced me to really go ahead was just how incredible you guys were, because Tara and Darren were just so. I felt like I was part of a family before I'd even met you, and that was just phenomenal. It was the most amazing feeling, and I felt like we were held, and I felt like there was an understanding of how huge this was for us. And often you don't get that. You really don't get that. In other venues, people, whatever. They don't understand the huge distance, firstly, that we're traveling and how expensive it is. And I have to say that was one of the most brilliant experiences working with you all in Edinburgh, and one of the most challenging experiences as well. And something that I will never forget, and something that I will be forever proud of. And for me, it was never about making money, and it wasn't about selling out shows. It was just about being able to get to the end and say, we did it,
Absolutely. And I think that's very much the whole point of, I think, if you're coming to the Fringe as a whole, it's, what you want to get out of it, but it's never, if you're coming to make money, we generally say to people or anyone, that's not what you're there for. If you're looking to make money, I'd probably tell you not to try and come, because that's an even bigger risk.
Don't be an artist.
In the that's the other flip side, is probably don't do that side of it. But and it was one of those experiences. And every now and then we get shows, companies, and clients. Obviously, we deal with massive amounts, and I say last year, 2019 being our last Fringe, we were 170 plus shows. And things like that. And there's just a few every now and then, and there's people that just kind of stick with us and that we kind of remember, and that we just go, yes, that works. And for whatever reason it is, everything just clicks, from whether that's of how you gel with us as a company. And I think, it was a great year. I think it was, and certainly one of the shows that I was like, fine. And because there was so much work that went into getting you guys with us. And I think it very much felt from our point of view that you guys that you were trusting us with it as well. I think that was from us, is that we were like, right, we need to make sure that what we've said we're going to deliver, we deliver, and that it's there and it's what it's expected to be, and that's what it was. And it was certainly one of those. It was a great. I do it every year, so I would have been 8. This would have been my 7th year in 2020.
Wow.
But, I think it was one of those, but.
And to explain to the listeners that the reason why I guess it was so, complicated is that often with Fringe shows, there's not so much tech, right? Like you get shows with 2 people, there's no mics, it's lots of acting and kind of acoustic. But our show had a 4-piece band. We required a full PA setup. We had multiple instruments, and we also had a physical theatre performer. So that was an added element. When you have to set up a PA and, microphones and speakers and all of those things in the space of, how long did we have? What was the changeover? It was like 10 minutes?
So depending on when the show, before you generally it's an hour and 10 minutes in total you've got for your show, including in and out. In theory, and if the show before you is really nice, you can kind of sneak in and do a few bits before, depending on how that is going, or if they're really pushed for time. So, but it was tough. I certainly remember, I think the first couple of times it was a bit of touch and go, and it was a bit kind of that. But once you've done it a few times, it's there, it's done, it's dusted, and it just becomes clockwork. And I remember that.
The other thing just to mention is that you were like our little hero, because you weren't actually scheduled on to do our show, but you stood in for every single show. That wasn't even your job, but you did it and helped with the changeover because we needed extra hands. So you just did that out of the goodness of your own heart.
I'm there like I said, my job is kind of, I oversee an awful lot, and I know, and I kind of, certainly in the early few days, I pick my pinch points of where issues are going to be, and it's kind of, okay, if this doesn't go as we want it to be planned, not only does it affect you guys, I think because you guys were like prime time slot, certainly in the early days, and I was like, we need to, for you guys, get this right, and kind of for the guys afterwards as well. And I was like, because otherwise I'm just gonna never hear the end of it. There's this thing so there's that side of it as well. But I was like, we've put so much effort into getting you guys here. I was like, I can't. I'm not just going to go through. I was like, I've done all this work. Let's get it and do it right. So it was kind of, let's make sure that this is there. And also there's a part of a slight thing is, so the forest theatre that you're in at Greenside it's my favourite. It's the space that it's just stuck with me. And for whatever designed and everything. So I was like, yeah. So I always enjoyed working in it as well. So any excuse to work in it and kind of do some bits and pieces. But yeah, it was great. It was a challenge, but it was a great and a fun show to do as well. I think that's part of what, from my own point of view as well, is like I said, is a lot of fringe shows don't have a lot of tech involved in them. They keep them really straightforward and really simple, which is great and works really well. But for me being a tech guy, I was like, I've got stuff to do. Yes, let's go. Dive straight in and get things to do. So it was, and it was that. And I think it was also because the show before you was quite a big one as well, if I remember.
It was.
So it was getting them out as well to make sure that we didn't keep that knock-on effect. So, but yeah, it was great fun and do that. But I've realised we've talked about it. We're not actually talked about what the show was. What it is. So,
the show, it was called Broken Romantics, A Unicorn's Quest for Love, and it was all about my heartbreak stories, collected and put into like a 50-minute show. Some of the songs were covers, and most of the songs were originals. And so I guess the show, there were funny moments, and there were sort of more heartfelt moments, and it was kind of a bit of a smorgasbord of human emotion. And like I said, there were a band of 4 people. There was I played keyboard, and there was a violinist, and my brother on a drum, sort of electric drums, and Katie Swan on backing vocals, and then we had this beautiful physical theatre performer, Jamie Kendall, who weaved his magic throughout the show. He kind of played the ghost of past boyfriends. So it was a lot of fun. We toured that show for about 2 years. We did a few, tours in Australia, and then, of course, the biggest one was Edinburgh Fringe.
No, it was great, and I can't remember how it was introduced to me, that this is what it was, and I can't remember if it was yourself or Tara, and I was like, I think it was I just got the title initially. I got told what the title was. I didn't have any other context, so I'm like, okay, so we're talking unicorns here, but I had no idea what I was getting myself in for, what was going on. I was like, okay, fine, it's the Fringe, let's go with it, it's fine, we'll see what happens. And then I think that was when Tara initially broached it to me of like, and Tara was like, I think this would really work, like, she's really keen, I think we can make it work. I was like, okay, fine, and she just gave me your name and your show title, and I was like, okay, fine, let's find out exactly what it is, what is it that we've got to make happen. And actually, and in the grand scheme of things, actually making tech side of things happen isn't the most difficult. I was like, okay, we can make this work, that's fine. And you guys were really keen to work with us as well to make sure that it's happening. I think there were quite a few conversations between myself and Tony as well about how the best thing for him to what works out, but also obviously what he needs, and also what speeds it all up. So, and that was great from our point of view, and I think that's from us as your venue provider. It sounds a bit random, but your venue provider, when you're like, yeah, great, and being flexible about it, and made the whole thing great fun. And it was a great 3.5 weeks, nearly 4 that it is.
Oh my God, it was so much fun. We just, we really got lucky with you guys. We absolutely loved our time at Greenside venues. But like you said, the unicorn, word in the title, often, when we were on the Royal Mile and we're flyering and we're dressed as like rainbow unicorns, and this is an adult unicorn show, let me just tell you. Of course, we'd get mostly kids coming up to us, and we'd have to like look at their parents and say, no, don't bring them, it's an adult show. I
think it happened on a couple of occasions that we got a few people in who were on the younger side, and it was like, and I remember telling the house guys going, you need to make sure they're aware with the parents who are with them that there is content in this show that's really not aimed at them.
I tell you what, I remember one night, Jamie Kendall, the physical theatre performer, there's an audience participation moment, and he's got to pick a man to basically come onto the stage, and I straddle them, and he tries to lick their eyeball. Long story, we won't go into the details. But who does he pick? I swear this kid was like 16 years old, and I was like, oh my God, what do I do in the moment? Like, I think I asked him, like, how old are you? Under my breath. Oh. And anyway, so there were a few cringy moments like that.
Amazing. But it was so much fun. It was great. And like I said, it's, where it comes from and things like that. So, that's the story of how we first kind of got, how we met and things like that. And a whirlwind that was an Edinburgh Fringe month.
Yes.
That kind of do that. So, obviously, you touched on that some of the songs in that were your own, that you write yourself. So, I just wanted to kind of chat with you as a recording artist, because obviously that's not one thing, but something that you do from there. So I think it's, all kind of where you've developed from and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I started off, well, to be honest, going right back to the beginning, I was a classical violinist. So that was my first thing that I did. And then tried to study piano. And that kind of took me into this, took me on this journey to really explore songwriting. I think that all came about because I was really shy. And I really didn't know how to talk to people. I didn't really know how to express my feelings very well until, well into my 20s, really. Very, very shy. And so I'd write songs. I'd write songs like diary entries, like journaling. And I guess it was a natural progression. When I was in university, so I went to the Queensland Conservatorium of Music, and I started my first little duo called Bittersweet, and recorded an EP. And I've really just kind of been recording music ever since, with various different bands, and releasing that. But it's been a little while. I kind of got into the habit of releasing singles rather than full EPs or albums. But this year is the year. I figure it's probably safer for me to go into the studio and record than it is to try to book any sort of touring, right? And my amazing brother Tony, who you talked about before, has a beautiful studio in his spare room, and he calls it Tiny Dream Studios. So we'll be going in and recording an album together. And it'll be really different, Callum. Like, it'll be different to the music that you heard in Broken Romantics, which was kind of like theatrical pop music, I suppose. Yeah. And I've just started playing the guitar. So this album will be a little bit more guitar-y and a bit folky and Celtic and a bit country. And so I'm really looking forward to just exploring that. So that's the plan.
And that's I love that idea that you kind of develop things through, and like you said, from there. And that, like I said, and I kind of touched on earlier that there's kind of that difference between being a performer on a stage theatrically and then you as a recording artist doing gigs and stuff. And obviously your shows kind of fall a little bit in the middle.
Yeah, they do. I think we called Broken Romantics a gig theatre show instead of like cabaret or straight theatre. It's sort of like a gig, and it's sort of like theatre. It's not like a traditional cabaret show as such. But I think that's a good descriptive term for what we do, for what I do. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's kind of and I think that's kind of, it is nice in that sense. And gig theatre, I think it was the year after you came to the Fringe in 2019 was massive. There was some really big gig theatre shows that came in and kind of, it was what everyone was talking about. I think it was a show called Sirens that was there that a friend of mine, Tim, was involved with, that was kind of fell into that gig theatre kind of thing. And there were a few other bits of stuff like that really kind of were the kind of talking about. And I think it kind of, certainly within the UK, it's something that is a little bit more prevalent than certainly it used to be, and that kind of
Wow.
things like that. So yeah, gig theatre is certainly something that in the UK certainly is becoming more, or seen a little bit more in that sense, and kind of breaking the mold of what theatre is, and kind of bringing those elements from both worlds of the two things, and going, right, let's kind of marry the two together and really kind of make something, and really think about it a little bit more as well from like initial conception, that it's not something that, well, it doesn't quite fit here, it doesn't quite fit here, so we'll do this. But so from initial conception is talking, yeah, let's make this a piece of gig theatre from day one. So
I love that. And, you know, this is really fascinating to me because it's not something that is sort of prevalent in Australia. In fact, I don't know if I've ever heard of a show in Australia being described as gig theatre. And if I remember correctly, one of my friends, Lala Barlow, who I met in Edinburgh, at Edinburgh Fringe, who happens to be from Melbourne, she was the one that told me about gig theatre. And she said, you know, your show's kind of like gig theatre. And she had seen that year a few shows that were actually described as gig theatre at Edinburgh Fringe Festival. So it must be, at that point, I didn't realise it was an already sort of coined phrase. But yeah, so that's fantastic. We need more gig theatre in Australia. Or maybe I need to move there eventually.
It's cold. So all I'm going to say is it is like there's a massive, like, it's not just a little different, it's like polar opposites. Actually, saying that, this summer, our lockdown summer was probably the best summer we've had in years. Like there was
how sad that you were locked down.
Well, at least, so I ended up back at my parents, and they live in a wonderful part of the country, and it was like middle of nowhere. So I was like, I could at least still kind of get out on my own and kind of and do that, which was nice. But so we had one of the best summers we've had for ages, and there was, well, I'm convinced there was more than a coincidence that the world stopped and our weather just went beautiful and nice and sunny and no clouds, no nothing. And I was like, there's got to be there's more than just coincidence to this, that the world has stopped and our weather a month later is ridiculous. And like we had, for us to have weeks of 30-degree temperatures is like unheard of, and it was great and made that first lockdown, I think, for everyone so much better. This third one for us being in the middle of winter is quite difficult. Like we're coming into a bit now where we're getting a bit more daylight, and like so in Edinburgh, for instance, at the kind of shortest day, it's pretty much dark by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and you're like, yeah. So that makes it that little bit more difficult. So having that in the summer was great. So yeah, I'm all for moving to Edinburgh, and I've done it, and I'm here, and it's great, and I love the city, but. The winters are, I've compared to Australia, are brutal, and they're not even like we're not even the worst winters. Like if you go a few hours north of here, they've still got like a foot and a bit of snow, and it's
oh my gosh,
we don't get it because we're on the coast, so it's fine.
Wow.
Yeah, gig theatre, it's a thing that kind of is people certainly have. Not quite mainstream yet, but certainly in that kind of mid-scale theatre and stuff like that, there was quite a bit certainly that was starting to go around that kind of very much is in that kind of genre, and kind of making more of it, and kind of taking those really elements from gigs and concerts and stuff, and kind of going, sweet, we can make that marry in and it works here, and having that kind of real mix, and kind of bringing performers together that would never necessarily work together on stage, which is always quite nice, I think. So
absolutely
great. So
that's exciting.
Yeah, which is weird. And like you said there, it's so weird that there's kind of this almost different. Well, obviously there is a different culture, but these two kind of places, and is very different in how theatre is, and it's kind of and what's around. Obviously in the UK,
absolutely,
in the UK we're kind of very much seen as West End and very kind of classical, and obviously our festivals and stuff are massive, but then like when I think of Australia and stuff like that, like I'm very aware that a lot of the big musicals in our West End are still in Australia as well, touring in a different version and show over there as well. So and I'm still adamant to get to Adelaide Fringe at some point.
It's really great as well. Oh my gosh, you have to come. Have you ever been to Australia?
No.
Oh,
No. So
yeah,
that's
you've gotta
another thing.
come.
So I've got to go over there at some point.
We've got a
But
guest room here, so you're most welcome to stay.
amazing. There we
We're
go.
by the water. The water, I'm looking
Oh, there you
out
go.
my window and it's,
There you go.
beautiful
Well,
view.
as and when I'm allowed to travel and I've had this vaccine eventually,
Yes, yes.
that's now going around. But sadly, I'm quite young, so I'm quite far down the list in the order they're vaccinating in the UK.
Of
But
course, of course.
so yeah, but absolutely, like, yeah, Adelaide Fringe to me is definitely up there on the list. Obviously, with the amount of work I've done, certainly with the Edinburgh Fringe and stuff like that. And there's a little bit of crossover, not as much as you probably think, but yeah, it's definitely on my list. And yeah, just spending some time in Australia as and when I get a chance. I was kind of hoping that, or if I stay with Matthew Boyne's New Adventures, they've toured Swan Lake to Australia before, so I was kind of hoping that maybe if I tour with these guys, there'll be a chance that if producers will take another one of his shows, or even Swan Lake comes back around, then there'd be a chance for me just to come over and tour with that. And
Wow.
yeah, so that would be amazing. But
Fingers crossed that happens in the future when the world has gone back to
absolutely, when the
normal.
world's
If
back to
that ever
normal.
happens.
I hopefully we'll
A
get
new
somewhere
normal.
close, get a new normal.
That's
But,
right.
So yeah, so obviously you kind of create shows and music and stuff like that, and you touch obviously your latest show being Hot Mess Mama and stuff like that. So when you're kind of creating your shows, do you always go into like a theme? Do you have something, or you just go like light bulb moment and go, yeah, okay, this is what we're doing. We're gonna go, and this is what I want to do, or
Yeah, it's different for the different shows. With Broken Romantics, A Unicorn's Quest for Love, I had a lot of those songs already written. So it was actually a kind of backwards process whereby I wrote a script or a story kind of loosely around those already existing songs and then filled in the blanks that needed to be filled with new songs. With Hot Mess Mama, I co-wrote that show with a brilliant Australian playwright called Catherine Lyle Watson, and we had a concept. So we knew that we wanted to write something about the environment and about the state of the world in regards to climate change, and so this idea, we kind of went through lots of different concepts, and definitely the idea evolved, even like up to the final moments of actually, we're about to perform this show. And I think for me, it usually happens when I'm on a walk or on a run. When I'm moving my body somehow, I get an image, like a flash. And I can see myself on stage in a certain costume with certain lighting, and that's like the starting point. And then I kind of figure out what that image means. Who am I? What's this story all about? And then flesh it out from there. But that show, Hot Mess Mama, kind of really did start from scratch. There were no already existing songs. We created as we went. And it wasn't particularly linear either. Like we kind of wrote a song about, the fires, and then we wrote a song about various things, and then kind of strung it all together. And then, the show that I'm about to perform on Saturday, which is just a one-night show, Emma Dean Live and Lush at the Brisbane Powerhouse. And that's just like a collection of all of my sort of my back catalogue and some new songs, and that will be much more laid back with me as myself on stage with a band telling stories and singing songs. But it is still, even within that sort of, I guess, more gig world, as opposed to gig theatre, it still is a little bit theatrical in the way that it's presented. So I guess there's a spectrum with all of my work. Sometimes it's really theatrical, which Hot Mess Mama was. And then, it can be a little bit more gig-like and a little bit more laid back. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. So you also touched on really early on that you're a choir director. And
Yes.
or work with your community choir at Cheep Trill.
Yeah.
So yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, look, they light up my life. Honestly, the choir has truly changed my life. It all started when I was living in New York, and I lived in New York in 2013, so quite a while ago now. And I moved there to give my music a bit more of a chance. I think because I didn't really fit into a particular genre in Australia. People didn't really get me, you know, my radio certainly didn't play me. The industry were like, what is this chick about? I don't really understand. Like, you know, she doesn't, the way she's presenting her music is weird. I don't really know what box to put her in. So I thought New York, I went on a trip actually to New York the year before and had a fantastic time and did a showcase concert and met an agent who was really keen to work with me and all of this. So I felt like there was momentum there. So I moved there. And to be honest, it was like, I'm so glad I did it. But it was probably the point in my life that I hit rock bottom, I'd say. I got really, in hindsight, I know now, I got really, really depressed. And I think part of it was, you know, I was away from family. I was living in a shoebox apartment with my partner at the time, who was also a musician, but he didn't have the right visa to sort of get out there and do lots of gigs. And we were sort of living off not very much money at all. And by day I was this children's entertainer, and then by night I was actually performing, and it was fabulous. I loved this part of it. I was performing with some of the RuPaul's Drag Race drag queens, you know, on off Broadway as their opening act, and it was really hard. You know, I didn't get paid for those gigs. This is all coming back to choir, by the way. I promise.
Right.
I'm going on a little tangent, but I promise I will
Tangents
answer your
are
question.
encouraged on the podcast.
Yeah, good. Okay. So I'd sort of have to stand by the door as people left. And sometimes this was at 3 a.m., you know, after a really big day, and I'd just try to sell my CDs to people. And that was sort of how I made money. It was pretty tough. And I guess I realised all of the things I was going to have to do if I wanted to really kind of climb that ladder. And I guess I wasn't prepared to do them because they made me really sad. I felt really isolated, and I'm not very good at schmoozing, and I'm not very good at talking the talk and staying up until really late boozing. I'm not that person. And it felt like that's what it was all about. Anyway, my partner and I had decided to move back to Australia. And I was talking to my beautiful friend from the UK, Alice Flynn. And she told me, hey, have you ever thought about starting a choir? My friend just started this choir in the UK. I reckon you'd be really good at that. And here I was, rock bottom, longing for connection, feeling so isolated that I thought, that's actually exactly what I want. I just want to reignite the spark I had for music, because I'd really lost it. I really was just like, this is bullshit. I really hated the industry, and I didn't like what I was doing, right? And so that day I put up a little Facebook post saying, hey, we're moving back to Australia. Is anybody interested in starting a singing group? I'm just thinking in my parents' lounge room to start with, like, you know, maybe just, Anyway, so I just kind of put it out there, and then I went to bed. The next morning I woke up and I had about 100 emails, you know, comments, DMs from people just hungry for something like this. And I realized, okay, there's something in this. I'm going to start a choir. So we all started in January 2014 on the veranda of an old Queenslander in Everton Park in suburban Brisbane, overlooking a paddock with cows. And it was very humble, I did Wednesday and Thursday nights, about 20 people in each choir. Anyway, you know, looking forward to 2021, we've got a huge community of people. Of course, due to COVID, we've had to restrict numbers significantly, but usually our choirs are we've got a Northside Brisbane choir, which is about 100 people, and then 100 people in our Southside Brisbane choir, and a huge waiting list. Because people are they're craving connection, and they're craving community. And especially, I think, after the year we've had. And it's just such a shame that we can only let a certain amount of people in because, you know, everybody is just going mad for choirs at the moment. So yeah, Cheep Trill is like my extended family, and they've taught me to love music again. Whenever I've had a rough day, I go to choir, and without a shadow of a doubt, they've turned my frown upside down within the first 10 minutes. There is a profound, power in drawing people together from different backgrounds. You know, we're talking different sexualities, genders, religions, races, ages, all different demographics, people who normally wouldn't connect on, you know, in normal life. And you see these people chatting and realizing, oh, we're not actually that different. You know, you get fundamentalist Christians talking to transgender women, you know, and you get like, you know, Muslims talking to Christians, like, and it's just this, you see 70-year-old men chatting to, you know, 16-year-olds, and we're all just kind of bypassing all the things that separate us, and I guess focus on the stuff that connects us. And it's just the most beautiful thing to witness and be part of.
Yeah, it is amazing that having just that one little thing in common that is wanting to sing can just...
That's
it transcends all creed, colour, however you want to... If you want to put a label on anything, it just rubs it off and disappears. And once we're in that kind of... and things like that, and there's a project similar in kind of Edinburgh and Scotland called Got Soul Choir.
Oh, wow.
That runs across Edinburgh, Dundee, and I want to say there's one in Glasgow, which is similar, and I think that's around, and they've got obviously 3 set up in a similar setup, and they all come together and do that. And we did, I mean, it's 2017 was the last time I worked. They did their big show in the Usher Hall, which is a 2,000 seat theatre here in Edinburgh.
Oh, wow.
And the place is packed, absolutely packed. All their friends, family, and there must be, I think it was something around sort of, I don't know the exact numbers, about 200 odd people up in this theatre there, and just no one, like you said, no one's got any brought together simply because they just want to sing. And it is amazing how these kind of choir things kind of, that bring, like you said, people who would never even have thought about it before.
Absolutely. It's so beautiful. And so many people, I think, love to sing, but they're so afraid to do it by themselves. So this idea of kind of doing it in a large group of people is much less, you know, you feel much less vulnerable, I suppose. And yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. Everybody, listeners, go out and join a choir today. I tell you what, it'll change your life.
I think it is amazing seeing these choirs and stuff come together, and also, being involved in that. Like I said, I worked with the one here in Edinburgh for a little bit, and and hearing what the arrangements and things that come together and what they can do is, and obviously that's Got Soul, so specialises in around soul music, so it's always quite, so the things that they do is always quite, was very interesting to sit and watch. But I think it is amazing, and like you said, it's, again, that whole thing comes back to the arts, kind of just, it brings people together at the very simplest way, really. And you touched on it there, that certainly after the year we've had. And it's amazing that you've got a massive long waiting list of people to join it, because everyone's just wanting to, at the very least, have some social side of things.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's great.
Totally.
So how have you found this? One thing that baffles me, and Jay hasn't done a lot of it, or people have asked, how do you find, if you've done things on Zoom, how have you found those kind of Zoom rehearsals or sessions and stuff like that? How do you find that? Because I'm kind of sat there going, Zoom's great and I absolutely love it, but there's also part of me that goes, if you've got a Zoom call with 30 odd people in it, I'm going, I don't know where to look.
I know, it's really tricky. We set out to start, we called ourselves Computer Choir during our initial sort of COVID lockdown, and we set out to do this and make it really, really clear that this is a different thing. It's, you know, our normal choir, this absolutely cannot replace our normal choir. Yeah. It's a totally different thing. Do not expect, you know, rehearsals to run in a similar way. They can't. So basically the way that we did it, we have sopranos, altos, tenors and basses, and we did a half an hour rehearsal with each of those sections. So it's 2 hours all up, half an hour with each of the sections. So it meant that, you know, you were seeing not 200 people,
yeah, absolutely.
But kind of 30 people, or some, depending on how many people turned up. And that was manageable. So the way, of course, with Zoom, you've got like a delay. You've got a delay depending on where people are. And the other thing to mention is that this computer choir was open to people all over the world. So we would have people in the middle of the night in the US log on for their rehearsal, people in the UK, my uncle in the UK, like, you know, people at all different time zones. And so I would sing the part and play the part and have everybody on Zoom, and they'd be singing along with my voice. So it kind of felt like they were doing a little duet with me, and that's how they'd learn. We'd record guide tracks, so we'd send them all these files, you know, so in their own time they could listen to these guide tracks and practice their part. And then at the end of the 4 weeks, what we did was, because we felt that people like to have an outcome. They like to, you know, to do a performance at the end of the term. So what we did was create a music video. And so we got everybody to send their voice in using just simply like their little iPhone or smartphone voice memo, and they'd sing along to the track. Tony, the magician, my brother, would mix all of their voices together with our backing track and create this epic sound. And so we kind of released this as a free single. And then my good friend / Tony's partner, Katie Swan, who was in the show, she, for a bit of comedic relief, she has this character, this sort of drag character called Glenn Destiny Ray. And Glenn Destiny is not quite a dancer, but he's more of a mover and a shaker. And he did a bit of choreography, so people could actually learn some crazy dance moves, video themselves, and we actually edited a music video. So you can have a look at that online if you look for Computer Choir, and maybe even Cheep Trill, I'm not sure. And it's all there, and it was just such a hoot, and people actually really loved it. What we didn't anticipate, however, is how scary it was for so many people to record themselves, because as I failed to realise, most of those people had never heard their voice solo.
It's an odd thing to get used to. Doing these. So like, I'll record an intro bit, like later on, and I'll sit there and I just hit record and just say and just talk and figure out a way to do it. But I can remember the first time hearing I've heard it a few times, but when you're sat there hearing that, and like these, I listen to them back to obviously to check they're all right, and I'm like, yep, fine. Okay. And it's an odd.
It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
You don't realise until you're kind of doing it. And, you know, we had actual emails from people saying, you know, I don't think I can do it. I'm actually having a panic attack. I can't do it. And so that was really good for us to know. We didn't think that through properly. So the second term, I guess, prefaced the process and the experience by saying, you know, this could be really scary. It can be really vulnerable, but please know that Tony will mix your voice so beautifully that you won't sound exposed. You know, you are in safe hands.
It's not you on your own. Yeah.
That's
absolutely.
right. That's right. Yeah. So, yeah, it was a fascinating process. And I'm actually, even though we're doing in-person rehearsals with a limited number of people, I still really love doing computer choir because we can reach people from all over the world, and it was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've talked to a few people now, and they've all said this, that actually through all of this, there are, again, more positives to come out of it, that taking things online and having this online offering, suddenly they're reaching these new markets and people that would never normally have a chance to get to see things or interact with them. So I did a thing with a children's theatre in London, Polka Theatre, and they did a whole like offering of interactive online workshops and stuff, and suddenly they've got people from Italy and France and all of this sort of stuff that would never have been able to be involved in this stuff, and they're fully planning to carry these on all the way through. And I think, and you've just said the same there, which I think is amazing, and reaching out to new people, new audiences that would never, potentially in a situation where they haven't got that on their doorstep, or they're just not in a position to do it, which I think is amazing, that all these things are suddenly available and everyone's suddenly gone, it's great, and have decided to carry things on and kind of keep producing more and more things. It is great that
Absolutely.
all these things have to do that, and it is great that you guys have done that, and it is amazing that you are now in a position within Brisbane that you can start to kind of get somewhere back to normal. Obviously you said with some slight restrictions on numbers and stuff, but it is good
we are so lucky. We really are so lucky because, you know, as I'm sure you're finding, the mental health benefits of just that human connection and community are so profound that,
and,
you know, the repercussions of these lockdowns are going to be felt, I think, for many months, for a long time.
Unfortunately, I think so, and I think that's why like I said, I imagine your wait list has potentially grown even as a result of this. People have gone, actually, do you know what, having some other people around and things like that. And I've certainly found that these podcasts have certainly helped me. Like, I've caught up with people that I've, like yourself, who I haven't spoken to in ages, or just people that I have spoken to in that, but not just talking about what we'd normally talk about. It's talking about things that do that, like I've done with Darren and Tara. And as weird as that was, as the three of us obviously knowing each other so well, and it was like, okay, I've got to try and take a step back here from being your friend, and it's just you guys talking about what you do and stuff like that. And actually it was cool to that. And I had the story of how Greenside officially started, and I didn't even know that, and I've worked for them for getting on for 8 years, and I was like, and it was great. And it's like I said, and it's it makes you realize, and I think that sense of community. So we'll jump into kind of what I call my wrap-up questions. Everyone gets asked the same 3 questions, and these stemmed from a conversation on the back of a truck at 6 a.m. on a get out. Or certainly one of them did, which is that, and because obviously you're all a bit tired, so you're talking some very interesting, unusual things at this point. But the first one is this, and I think this may depend on what hat you're wearing to that. But if you had a dream show or gig that you could be involved in, that you could write or create, what would that be for you?
Oh, wow. You know, I really, really want to write a musical, like a musical. Yeah. You know, for the West End, for Broadway. And not even be in it. Like, that's the other thing. I'd just like to be in the background and write all the music and kind of craft it with the people behind the scenes. So if you know anyone, Callum, send them my way.
I'm pretty sure I could put a team together to be involved, a creative team to make a musical.
Yes, let's do it. Let's do it.
I'm not joking. Musical directors set, like, I'm pretty sure I could bash a team together.
Oh my God.
We've all got time on our hands right now as well.
That's right. I think that would be my dream. I don't know what it would be about, but that's it. Yeah.
The second one, this is the one that comes from the back of a truck conversation. So after a show, rehearsal, or anything like that, what is your go-to snack? it turns out there's something that everyone has. There's one thing that everyone seems that you ask them it and they go, oh yeah, well after every show, this is just what I crave, or this is what I need. And I was like, and then realised myself, oh, that's actually a thing as well. Okay.
Yeah.
Everyone's got something.
Oh, okay. So I would say the thing I have most snacked on after shows, like especially when I come home and like I'm not a big kind of drive-through like fast food person.
Yeah.
So I would go for some rice crackers and hummus. That sounds really boring, doesn't it? But honestly, so tasty.
No, there's lots of people said there's just something like that, especially after a show when that adrenaline and stuff stopped and you've kind of a little bit of a crash afterwards. Just goes, and just something to chill you out and comfort is and dusted. For me, it's another sugar boost, but that's just what it is to pick it back up.
Yeah, that's interesting. I do love a glass of wine actually after.
That's another one that is an absolute
Wine.
guarantee.
Yeah, 100%.
Joys of UK theatre, that there's always a pub across the road from stage 4.
Yes!
There's
So
absolutely
handy.
no coincidence in that. And the third and final question, which is always just quite interesting to see how people feel like that. If there's one piece of advice that you wish you'd had when you were first starting out in your career and everything started out that you obviously know now, that would have made your life so much easier, what would have that been? So if you could almost go back and tell yourself, this is that one thing.
Well, I think I was always in a big rush. I think I was under that misconception that I had to make it. I say that in inverted commas because I don't, I've redefined what that actually means for me, but I felt like I had to be a successful musician by the time I was like 19. How ridiculous, what a stupid amount of pressure. So I think I'd go back and I'd say, honey, chill the fuck out. You've got time and you're just, you're going to get better. Have some great life experiences and allow that to feed your art. Just relax. Yeah.
Amazing. I think that's some great advice for a lot of people as well. Emma, this has been an absolute blast. I've had a great time catching up.
Thank you for listening to the Stage Is Yours podcast. Want to know more? Then head over to all of our socials. You can find us at Stage Is Yours Pod, where you can catch a cheeky glimpse at some of our upcoming guests, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to make sure that you never miss an episode. This has been the Stage Is Yours podcast, talking all things theatre and events. Until next time.